This is a short story called Moving On, written by Brian Fine and narrated by Wendy Fine. My name is Henny. To be more precise, as is stated on my birth certificate, I am Hendrik French du Plessis, born 13th of May 1969 in Pofadder, tucked away far from anywhere in the Northern Cape, in the Republic of South Africa. Now, my rabbi, yes, that's correct, my rabbi, well, he wants to call me Chaim, which is kind of crazy. So I told him that I was born Henny and I want to die Henny. You can't help how you were born.
Good.
Anyway, all that happened over 50 years ago, and now I live in Sydney, Australia. Yes, my mate, you guessed it. Now I am a dinky-die, true blue, how d'ye do, new Jew, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi. By now you must be wondering what this guy is all about. Patience, mate. I'm about to tell you a story of how I got to be telling you this story. So let's begin. It is Sunday evening and I'm just relaxing in my big rocker, beer and chips by my side, getting ready to watch the footy, when suddenly my phone rings. Bloody hell, but I answer it anyway. Sitting there so innocently, I had no idea as I reached for my iPhone that this call was about to ignite a series of events, reopen old wounds, and rekindle old memories that I had so long ago stored away in the furthest recesses of my brain. The call was from Aaron Cohn, my neighbour and very best friend. "How's it, Aaron?" I answered. "Hey, Henny, how would you like to join us at a show at the Contemporary Art Museum?" "Thanks, but I'm not into modern art. Prefer photography myself." "Exactly, that's why I called. It's the Goldblatt exhibition, you know, the famous photographer, and his work is all South African, so we thought this might be right up your alley." "Jesus, Aaron, how did I nearly miss this? Must have slipped me by." "Maybe it's an age thing. I'd have kicked myself if I missed it." And so it came about that I found myself meandering slowly from room to room, absorbing the mastery of Goldblatt's work. As a keen photographer myself, I could appreciate the skill of the man behind the lens and his ability to capture and preserve some very vital moments in time. Walking around the museum, I felt like I was in a time warp as Africa came to life in these amazing works. It touched all my senses. I could smell the fragrance of the Namaqualand daisies as the Karoo transformed into a sea of colour following the first rains. Goldblatt had the skills to create a masterpiece, and each photograph was a work of art. I could hear the moaning of the weary oxen as they trudged their way home after a hard day in the field. I could smell their shit on the dry sandy soil, and hard as it is to explain, it was scent to my nostrils. So too was the unique odour of the dandy floor polish on the shiny verandas where the two tunnies used to sit and chat about their children. My ears picked up the chirping of the mossies in the marula trees as the sun set after another steamy day, and the voice of the dominee as he rambled on in the little prefabricated church. "Kom, laat ons bid. Come on, let's pray." I felt uneasy, but could not quite put my finger on why. Nostalgia is a strange thing, you know. You never know which way it's taking you. I had entered the section titled The Afrikaner. Casually shuffling from one photo to the next, I became conscious that I was now delving into a past life I fought so hard to bury. Like a rudderless ship, I had no idea where this could take me. A quick look at a teacher addressing his matric students, then onto a slightly more interesting shot of a farmer in the field fixing his old tractor. Instinct told me not to go any further. My heart said no, but my feet said go, until there I stood, my eyes focusing on the next image, a rather somber shot of 3 people at a table. At first I just stood there, transfixed and mortified as if struck by a bolt of lightning. Then my whole body started to tremble, and I felt the dizziness envelop me as I gasped for air, shaking in disbelief at what I had just seen. I had somehow been teleported back in time to the very moment this shot was taken. That boy, that 10-year-old boy in the picture was me, and that man was my father. Contrary to speculation, when people look at this photo, the woman in the picture was in fact Anna Marie, my older sister, and not my mother. She had died during my birth. The horrors of those times hit me like a tsunami, rushing, gushing, swirling, churning memories of a life long forgotten. As I settled myself on a nearby bench, the memory became even clearer. This photo was taken at a moment in time that I hated my father so much that I actually wanted to kill him. To most observers, the photo was quite simple. It captured a young boy, head down, eyes blankly staring at the table, with his family nearby getting ready for a meal. But for me, it was so different. The very instant I focused on the photo, I clearly recalled the pain in my jaw and the salty taste of blood as it slid down the back of my throat. "Sit still, you bliksem," I heard him mumbling. "Not another word out of you. Just sit still and shut up." All I wanted to do at that moment was to spit the blood right into his face. Even a 10-year-old could understand the folly of entertaining such a stupid idea, so I just sat there, holding back the tears, swallowing my own blood. Yes, I admit I had spattered some coffee on the Impala rug, not really enough to stain it, yet this innocent act resulted initially in a torrent of verbal abuse that was directly followed by a thorough beating. On this occasion, I was treated to a swollen jaw and bloody nose, and there I sat in disbelief that my father, Willem du Plessis, could be so sadistic, and then to do the unthinkable, he was allowing some Jewish photographer into our house to take some photos of our, to put it bluntly, not so happy family. Jews were not exactly welcome in our home. I guessed that the kike, as Pa called them, would have paid a few pounds for the privilege of humiliating us. God, how I hated my father at that very moment. I just wanted to kill him right there and then, taken his pistol and emptied the magazine. Now, please don't get me wrong. I hadn't always hated my father. On the contrary, for most of my young life, I not only loved him, looked up to him, and admired him, but he was my hero, my role model. I would lie awake at night imagining that someday I would become a leader just like him. I was the envy of all my friends. "You're so lucky to have a pa like that. He's a hero." We were always busy camping, riding, shooting, and all the fun things that I loved so much. Yes, my friends were right. I certainly was blessed with the greatest pa. Willem du Plessis better known as Doopie, was in every aspect a man to be admired. Tall, strong, handsome, and a man with a strong presence. Sunday was by far my best day, and I could hardly wait for the week to fly by and experience the Sabbath, my special day with my father. Outside the church it seemed everybody wanted to catch up and get a bit of my father. "Good morning, Doopie," as he was greeted by his very good friends. Oh yes, you had to be pretty close to call him Doopie. Others would just call him Meneer Du Plessis or Willem. Whichever way he was addressed, it was always with the utmost respect. To the elders he was Meneer Du Plessis, a true son of the folk, a tribute to his nation. He was an admired and respected member of the community, and so, as one would expect, we would sit right there in the very front pew of the old church. Church over, it was time for my training to get me ready for manhood. These were the times I loved and admired my father the most, for after the church he would change into his khaki uniform, and we would head off to the commando unit of the Ossewa Brandwacht, the guard of the Afrikaner people. The awesome sight of him on his horse, saddle polished to perfection, filled my heart with pride. He was the ultimate horseman who could ride faster and shoot more accurately than any other man in his unit. Of course, Doopie rode in the front, a proud lieutenant, a true Boer whose grandfather had fought the British, and even met Paul Kruger. Paul Kruger. He was from the finest Afrikaner stock, and the blood that ran in his veins was pure. It was not by coincidence that my name was Hendrik French Du Plessis, as I was so proudly named after our great leader, Hendrik French Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid. I had been blessed by the Almighty with this great father. Our afternoons with his unit were my absolute favourite. Comrades in arms, getting ready for the day when the good Lord would fully grant his blessing on us, and all the land would belong to the Afrikaner folk. I can remember him proudly boasting to his comrades of his great bravado and his skills, and how he could throw a Coca-Cola bottle out the window of his moving bakkie and hit any Kafir and knock them off their bike. And they would all laugh, slap him on the back, and beg for more of his wonderful stories and adventures. "Okay," he would say, "let me tell you how I got rid of the little kike who came for the widow Spannepoel's rent. I pulled out my pistol, stuck it in his big Jewish nose, and told the bugger in no uncertain terms that if he came back, I would knock his head off and fucking kill him. You should have seen the Jew boy run for his life. Never came back. Good riddance to bad rubbish." For this, he got more great applause. Oh yes, Doopie was a legend. Nobody buggered around with him. No ways. His biggest problem seemed to be selecting who he hated the most, the Jew, the English, Rooinek, or the Kaffir. Bloody Bantu, they stink like shit, and Jews just want your money, and as for the English, they cannot be trusted. I would lie awake at night, just imagining how, one day, when I grow up, I would be just like my father, Lieutenant Commander Hendrik Du Plessis. This, of course, was in another lifetime. It was all before the great scandal. Skander, as they call it in Afrikaans. Let me tell you, there were not many scandals in Pofadder worth mentioning, and nobody could ever imagine that the story that was about to break would leave the town reeling in disbelief for many years to come. This is the story of the demise of Dupi du Plessis. I can clearly recall now how my father would go to his evening commando meetings every Tuesday and Thursday night, week in and week out, and then Wednesday as well. I can remember when he came back, especially on Wednesday, after what he called special drill training, how he could smell of beer. Not the usual castle lager he drank, but more like the Bantu beer that was made in the backyards of the district. I never really took much notice of this, but I can remember its foul smell to this day. And then, one Wednesday night, he never came home. What had happened was that he was arrested in a raid on a shebeen, which is a drinking place the local black Africans used. Surely there was some major error here. What would Dupi be doing in a shebeen? He would never go to those kinds of places. Oh no, not Dupi. Anyone else, but not my pa. Something was not right. Must be a set-up. On any other occasion, he would have easily talked his way around this, but on this fateful night, he was caught performing the cardinal of all sins. You see, where we came from, you could talk to, you could shout at, and even assault a black person if you wanted to. But, and this is a very big but, you do not fuck them. The immoral act of fornication with a black woman was the sin of all sins, the worst thing you could ever do, especially if you were an Afrikaner. Now, this may not seem like a big deal to you, but at that time in South Africa, it was a crime by law for a white man to sleep with a black woman. And so he, Willem du Plessis, was arrested, and our lives were shattered in an instant. "Not guilty, Your Honour," he said in court, but it seems that the word of Frida Mukunu was taken into account before that of Willem du Plessis. She had told the court that they had been having regular Wednesday night meetings for over a year. Dupi called her a fucking liar in front of the court. He could hardly comprehend what was happening to him. His fate was sealed long before the court had even sat. Big mistake, as the commandos never met on Wednesday nights, and as he could not account for being out, he was sunk. Dupi was doomed. "Guilty on all counts," said the magistrate. "Sentencing will be passed in 1 week." 1 week of hell, of hell. And that was the beginning of the end of Mr. Dupi du Plessis. Overnight, he had become a leper with nowhere to turn. "Sis jou kafferboet," they would say as he walked down the street. Old friends would spit at him, and as a result, he became reclusive, ashamed to go out and mingle with his beloved people. No longer was he welcome at the church, and his commando friends had him excommunicated. "Fucking traitor," they would say, and if they had a chance, they would have tarred and feathered him. The regular flow of friends to our house dried up in an instant, and my father became an outcast. We the children were not excluded, for we had been deemed to have been born of fraught stock. We were shunned at every point, barred from playing with friends, shunned at school, and so our worlds, like the walls of Jericho, came tumbling down. And that is when the beatings began. First Anna Marie, and then me, a 10-year-old being thrashed almost daily as he took out his frustrations on the world. He blamed every Kaffir and the Jews for his misery. They had trapped him, told lies, set him up, and destroyed his life. He instantly lost his job on the railway, and we were out of money. At this lowest point of his now miserable life, he had given this Jew boy photographer for a few pounds, permission to take photographs of us sitting at the table. And Goldblatt, with all his skills, captured the moment. I'm just sitting there, semi-conscious, just staring at the bare table, pains all over my body and blood dripping down my throat. Well, I am not in Pofadder. I'm in Sydney, trying to recover from the innocent act, staring at just another one of Goldblatt's pictures. Others around me glance at this picture and quickly move on, without any concept of the story behind it. I know that I, too, should have another quick glance and move on. I don't even bother. I'm finished with that life, so I just turn my back on it, as I had learned to do so many years ago, and slip into the crowd of people around me, and I move on. Just keep moving on. Never look back. I guess you're wondering what happened to my father. In fact, all three of us. Before I go any further, I need to clarify something. To this day, I'm not exactly sure why I hated him so much at that moment. Was it a result of the beatings, or was it possibly the disgrace my father had brought on us? My suspicion is that I hated him for denying me the opportunity of fulfilling my dreams of becoming a brave commando lieutenant just like him. Well, the story goes like this. I do not think that I could ever actually have killed my father. Willem du Plessis could no longer stand the great dishonour he had brought upon his nation, to its people, and the du Plessis name. One morning he woke up, as usual at dawn, and rode out on his horse, this time dressed immaculately in his khaki commander uniform. He found a quiet spot overlooking his beloved land, and took out his pistol, and put the barrel in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. As for Anna Marie and me, well, we had our choices. Either we could live in the past and embrace the values we'd grown up with, or we could move into a rather frightening new world we knew so little about. We really had no choice. We were shunned and ostracized. Our lives in Pofadder were over, and there was no going back. I was moved on to an orphanage in Cape Town, but for Anna Marie, who was sickly, that would have been too traumatic, and she was taken in by an auntie in Pretoria. I spent 6 years in foster homes and orphanages until the day I was 16 and could go out and work. It was then that I got my first job at Weinberg's Hardware, where I experienced a different type of kindness, as Mr. Weinberg taught me the ropes and put me on a new course in my life. Soon I was invited to their home, and I experienced a warmth that had long been missing in my life. I was invited to speak weekends with them, and as the Shabbos Goy, I soon became acquainted with their strange ways and habits. They taught me English, and even Yiddish with its similarity to Afrikaans, and they made sure I went to night school, and they celebrated my graduation. These two Holocaust survivors treated me like the son they could never have. Their sudden death in a motor accident left me shattered, and I felt it was time again to move on. Never look back, just keep moving on. Now, that may have answered some of your questions. I set sail for a new life in Australia. All I had to my name was a few pounds and a small suitcase and a heap of memories. Apparently, that was not all, and the baggage I believed I had left behind seemed to have eventually caught up with me right there as I stood in front of that photo in the Contemporary Art Museum. Now, I no longer need to move on. I have a loving wife, 2 boys, and a lovely big chair that I'll relax in to watch the footy. I have finally been able to accept who I was and who I am today. You can never bury the past, but you can learn to focus on the future, and that future looks bright.